I mean, you're a journalist. Who better to ask about this and what's going on in legacy media with the biases and all of that? And then Trump gets shot. And
We haven't even processed as a country, right? Yeah.
And the media around it is, okay, CNN, he fell on stage. The Washington Post, Trump escorted away after loud noises at rally. NBC News, Secret Service rushes Trump off stage after popping noises. I mean, I have a list of ridiculous headlines from mainstream media, the New York Times, the Washington Post, USA Today. So I want to see if you can tell me what has happened from when I was a child and my parents would put on the news, and there was Dan Rather and Tom Brokaw and like a handful of really respectable journalists, and they would all report on the news at the very, the facts, and there was no
Right.
contextualizing, there was no inflammatory dialogue, there was no name calling, and
Mm-hmm.
and then you would walk away and you would form your own opinion about the news, and everybody would get along and life would go on. And we would have this, like, the peaceful transfer of power. And I also thought that the media's job was to kind of really be watchdogs on the government, right? Like, report on the corrupt things that are going on. And now it seems like they work for the government,
Mm-hmm.
one side or the other. So please tell me just what has happened here? And I'm not trying to like tin hat it. This is happening. It's clearly a bias and a rhetoric and a silencing. And I'm going to just leave it here at your doorstep for you to tell me what's happening.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's worth remembering that before World War II, and really from the founding of this country to World War II, there was just a lot more different points of view expressed in different media. There were a lot of newspapers. When you get with radio and then television, and then after World War II, it consolidates, particularly with television. And so you get that voice of God media like Walter Cronkite, or the New York Times, it says that's all the news that's fit to print. And so it really becomes much more narrow after World War II. And that lasts until 2020 or 2010. For the initial rise of the internet everybody knew would have this fragmenting effect on the media, that it would create a lot more different news sources. And there was a question around whether that would result in people being more open-minded or people creating their own filter bubble, as they would say. Really what happens is the social media companies pretty quickly get captured by mainstream establishment folks, including people with strong ties to the intelligence community, or at least strong ties to the foreign policy community. When Elon Musk takes over Twitter, it's really the first time that you have a social media platform that becomes liberated, and it's a place. It's not perfect, and we could talk about it, but it's just become a much freer platform, and it's really the first time we've seen that with the social media platform. You saw a little bit with Facebook, but pretty quickly, Mark Zuckerberg in 2017 caves into the establishment. So I think that we're reverting back to this earlier period, which was a much more exciting, interesting period. In the early 20th century, you'd have, communist newspapers, fascist newspapers, liberal, conservative, every little anarchist. You had a lot more plurality in terms of media. And then it consolidates after World War II for a variety of reasons. And yeah, the government did play a really strong role. Sometimes we're not totally sure, but there was a period where we know that the US government actually paid journalists secretly to basically propagandize for it. We don't know how much that's happening or how much of it is more cultural.
Is it different now, or we don't know?
It's hard to know. I mean, there's definitely these characters that we see that just echo the point of view of the CIA or the intelligence community or the foreign policy establishment. At a certain point, it doesn't really matter because the CIA itself is an instrument of American foreign policy. So when you get to foreign policy questions, but you see things like the Aspen Institute, which is heavily funded by the State Department, runs a pre-bunking campaign to basically program journalists and social media companies to dismiss the Hunter Biden laptop before it's released.
Right.
That was the most important of the Twitter files that I worked on. I did two big ones. One was on the decision to deplatform Trump, and the other one was to ban the story about the Hunter Biden laptop. And what I discovered was that there was this effort, a conspiracy really, or at least a secret effort by the Aspen Institute to basically prepare journalists to dismiss that story before it came out in October. They were doing this in July and August of that year. So that was very much an instrument of the state. Of course, the FBI had that laptop in December of the year before, so they knew it was there. They were spying on Rudy Giuliani, who was shopping the laptop as a story to people. So a very suspicious set of events. And you see the social media companies initially were an instrument of the US government and its propaganda. With Elon Musk, all of that gets revealed, and now we see a platform that's now available to different voices.
Keeping it real with Jillian Michaels.